Hi, everybody, and welcome to Lovefraud Live. Once you understand what a sociopath is, you may feel like you keep running into them everywhere. That's because millions of sociopaths are hiding in plain sight, and now you're finally seeing them. I'm Donna Andersen, author of Lovefraud.com, and tonight I'll explain how many sociopaths live among us. At the end of my presentation, I'll answer your questions. To join the chat or ask a question, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. No one really knows exactly how many sociopaths live among us, but the estimates are frightening. But first, who exactly are we talking about? As I've explained many times, love fraud refers to people who have exploitative personality disorders as sociopaths. The word sociopath is no longer an official clinical diagnosis. I use the word as an umbrella term for people who could be diagnosed with antisocial, narcissistic, borderline, or histrionic personality disorders, or psychopathy. The first four disorders are what the American Psychiatric Association, DSM-5, refers to as cluster B personality disorders. The DSM-5 is the diagnostic manual, the Bible for therapists and counselors. It says that cluster B personality disorders are characterized by dramatic, overly emotional, or unpredictable thinking or behavior. I also include psychopaths under the umbrella term of sociopath. Experts generally believe that about 1% of the general population, that's 1 in 100, meet the criteria for psychopathy. The diagnostic criteria for psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder include many overlapping traits and behaviors. So all psychopaths are also antisocial, but not all antisocials are psychopaths. Therefore, in my estimates, psychopaths are included with the number of people who have antisocial personality disorder. Now, I will say that there are professionals who don't agree with this approach. Therapists and counselors often use the word sociopath to mean someone who has antisocial personality disorder. However, the term sociopath originally meant anything deviated or pathological in social relations, and that's how I'm using it, exactly as the word was intended. So, I'm talking about people who could have antisocial, narcissistic, borderline, histrionic, or psychopathic personality disorders. My objective is to warn you about all of them because they are all destructive. For most of us, an abusive person's precise diagnosis doesn't really matter anyway. We just need to know that they're out there, they can ruin our lives, and there is no real cure. So, how many sociopaths are there? Multiple research studies have attempted to determine how many people living in the community have these personality disorders. And what does in the community mean? These are people who are not in mental institutions or prisons, but who are moving freely among us. Estimates of how many people in the community have these disorders do vary, depending on the study methodology and the population examined. So I looked at multiple studies to find the low range and the high range estimates for how many have these disorders. So here they are. These are the estimates for the prevalence of cluster B personality disorders according to various scientific papers. Antisocial personality, including psychopathy, is 3 0.05% to 3.8% of the population. Narcissistic personality disorder is 1% to 6.2%. Borderline personality disorder is 1.9% to 5.9%. And histrionic personality disorder is 0.3% to 1.8% of the population. If you add them up, it's 6.25% to 17.7% of the adult population are sociopaths, people who could be diagnosed with antisocial, narcissistic, borderline, or histrionic personality disorder or psychopathy. The average is 11.975%. So for convenience, Lovefraud rounds it up to 12%. Now, let's look at the actual numbers. In 2021, the adult population of the United States was more than 258 million people. If 12% of the population is disordered, that means we live among 31 million adult sociopaths. This is shocking. It's even more shocking when you look at how many sociopaths may live in your own community. To do this, check out the Lovefraud Risk Calculator on lovefraud.com. The calculation assumes that between 6% and 17% of the U.S. population are sociopaths. So just plug in your zip code and you'll see how many live around you. The Lovefraud Risk Calculator just works for U.S. cities. To try it, click on the link in the description below this video window. Sociopaths can be found in all cities and states. They're also in all demographic groups: male, female, rich, poor, all races, all religions, and all education levels. Here's something else to consider. Each of these personality disorders is both a syndrome and a continuum. A syndrome is a collection of traits or behaviors that tend to group together. A continuum means that individuals can exhibit the traits or behaviors to greater or lesser degrees. Therefore, disordered individuals are not all the same. There is this whole matrix of possible traits and behaviors that they may exhibit. Some are definitely worse than others. And here's another scary concept. People can be partially disordered, not bad enough to get a clinical diagnosis, but certainly bad enough to make you miserable. So, in addition to the millions of diagnosable sociopaths, many more individuals have partial disorders. So how many is that? I've never even seen an estimate for what this figure might be. If I were to guess, I'd say that there are probably as many partial sociopaths as there are fully diagnosable sociopaths. So that would mean, if you add them up, altogether, 24% of the population could have some level of disorder. All of these people cause problems for the rest of us, and that's why you need to be aware of them. Millions of sociopaths live among us, and they are everywhere. That's the presentation for tonight. Next, I'll answer your questions. If you want in-depth advice about your own situation, I offer personal consultations and a deep emotional release service. There's a link in the description below this video. Okay, well, looks like Patricia's here from England again, 1:01 a.m. Well, thank you for interrupting your sleep to be here with Lovefraud Live. Okay. Fishstick says, too many sociopaths. Yep, you could have given my speech. That's the short answer. There are just way too many. Okay, so Patricia says, I'm convinced that my friend's husband is histrionic. He just has to be the loudest in the room, talking about himself, bragging all the time, very loud, laughs out loud, too, and also bad-tempered. Well, those are definitely some scary traits. Histrionic personality disorder is pretty rare. In fact, I've only come across one person who said that he thought that that was what was wrong with his wife. They tend to be, yes, they tend to want to be the center of attention. They also tend to be promiscuous. So I don't know if this guy is promiscuous or not, but that's a really big clue as far as that personality disorder is concerned. But he definitely sounds like someone who you might not want to go to the party with. Okay. R.A. Andrews says 25% sounds about right. It's a very significant societal problem. Yeah, in fact, I have an article on love fraud that was, or actually it's a link to an article or a summary of an article that was linked to a paper done by Kent Keel, who is at the University of New Mexico, and another guy who's an economics guy. I can't remember the name. But essentially what they did was estimate the cost of psychopaths. Now, these are just the psychopaths. This is just the 1%, not everybody else that we're talking about. But they estimated the cost of psychopaths to society, and it was just staggering. Just absolutely staggering. It was, oh gosh, $400 million a year or something like that. Just an absolutely astronomical number of damage that they call. And what they looked at was essentially crime statistics. And, they cause a lot more damage than the crime statistics. So these are definitely bad people who are causing lots and lots of problems. Okay, so Mom with Phone says, when my cat died, I cried and felt very sad. My mother died last month. I have not cried or felt sad. What does this indicate? Gee, I'm not sure I can answer that question. Sometimes it's easier to feel emotion for a pet because the pets are innocent. The pets never do anything to intentionally hurt us. I mean, they might bite or something. I know my brother's dog bit my stepmother, but it was an accident. Nobody was mad. He just wanted the food. That was it. But an animal isn't going to do something to intentionally hurt you. They do something out of fear. They do something for survival, but they don't do something to get revenge. So I would say that you kind of have to look at your relationship, with your mother and what was going on there. And I mean, if you're not feeling sad, maybe there's a reason for that. It would be a good thing to reflect upon. I can say that. Okay. So Patricia says, my sister, the sociopath, also behaves in a very histrionic way. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I do use the term sociopath as a general term for all of these disorders, because there's an awful lot of overlap. There's a lot of common behaviors, and sometimes it's just like a parlor game to try and figure out which precise diagnosis somebody has. And if you're not a therapist, or if you're not testifying in court, it doesn't really matter, because there are no clear-cut disorders. It's not like cookie cutter, that, all the sociopaths are like this, and the narcissists are like this, and the borderlines are like this. It just doesn't work that way. People aren't like that. You don't fit in nice little cubes and matrices and squares. So, it could be any of it. The key to understand is that if someone has one of these personality disorders, it goes really deep. I mean, it is ingrained into who they are. So, whatever behavior you're seeing now probably won't get better. I mean, I wrote my book, Senior Sociopaths, and that's the main point of the book, is that they don't get better. I mean, according to my research, most people who have had disordered individuals in their life who were over the age of 50 said that they, were just as bad as worse, or worse as they were when they were younger. So these folks do not get better. And it's important to understand that so that you can make a decision about what you will do and how you will interact, even if you will interact. I mean, that's why it's so important to know that they're out there and know that they will never become a good, upstanding, wholesome, empathetic citizen. It's just not going to happen. Okay, so the narcissist I know lives at home with his parents. What do you think is their contribution to his disorder, and how is it living with someone with this disorder? Well, I couldn't say, just from that short question, what the parents' involvement is. There are definitely parents who are co-conspirators, shall we say, parents who are knowingly contributing and participating to the sociopath's bad behavior. And there are also parents who are trapped and manipulated, who, maybe understand that their child is disordered, but the sociopath is just so manipulative and so manipulating of the parents that they just don't know what to do. I mean, there's plenty of people who find themselves in that situation where the kid is taking advantage of them and, yelling at them and, using all their money and living for free and not contributing, but they don't know what to do about it. Or they do recognize that there's a problem, but they feel responsible, even if they weren't responsible, because, these disorders are highly genetic. And since genetics is a crapshoot, it's very possible that, a couple of parents can have a kid who has a predisposition for the disorder, that it just came, through the family tree someplace. Neither of the parents are disordered, but they still have this bad seed of a kid that definitely happens. So maybe that's what's going on here. So it's really impossible to actually answer that question. But your second question, how is it living with someone with this disorder, is a nightmare. It's just an absolute nightmare. So if you recognize that someone that you're either romantically involved with or sharing living accommodations with or is a family member, if you recognize that this person is disordered, don't live with them. I mean, it's just bad. It's always going to be bad, and it's never going to get better. Okay, so Patricia says, yes, my younger sister is 54 and is still evil. Yeah. The story in this book, I have lots and lots of stories, and some that I tell in great depth as far as what people's experiences were. And all those stories are true. The book is based on a survey that I did of Lovefraud readers, in which I asked them about their experiences with people who were over the age of 50 and that they believed had the personality disorder. And I mean, the story, it's just shocking. The stuff is just really shocking. And, unfortunately, especially when you're talking about marriages, there were lots of people who just believed that, if they just hung in long enough, that, that the person would outgrow it, would mature, would, finally, when the stress eased off, when the kids were out of the house, when they retired or something like that, that it would get better. And it doesn't. Okay? It doesn't. So it's really important to understand this, is that these folks are rotten to the core, and nothing you can do is going to change that. So it's important to understand this so that you can protect yourself. So Patricia said that she could write a book about her sister, and yep. In fact, lots of people have told me that. Lots of people have told me that their stories are just so unbelievable that you can't make this stuff up. And it's true. In fact, here's a sneak preview, is that Love Fraud will soon be starting a podcast called True Love Fraud Stories. And what I'm doing is interviewing people about their experiences with people who they think are disordered. And it's just going to be unbelievable, just absolutely unbelievable stories. And the idea is, for people to be able to hear these stories and hopefully learn what the warning signs are and how they behave. I mean, from the interviews that I've done so far, that's what people want to do. They want to share their experiences so that people can learn and hopefully not go through the things that they went through. So that's coming soon. So keep your eyes open for the Love Fraud podcast, True Love Fraud Stories. And okay, that appears to be all the questions that we have for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining me for this episode of Love Fraud Live, and we'll see you next week. Good night, everyone.